I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast. I'm your host, Antonio, and it is my absolute pleasure to bring to the show the iconic Diane Franklin. It's such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Greetings.
For that introduction. That was lovely.
I don't even know where to start. I'm going to first off say, huge fan for my, entire cinematic life. Since the very first time I saw Better Off Dead in the theater, and then Bill and Ted's in the theater, and just, it's interesting that you have in your IMDb, it says known for her curly hair and dialects, which is true. But
very true. Very true. Merci, buckets.
Oui. I got to tell you, for me, it's the grin, that lasting grin that's just burned inside my mind and my heart ever since I was old enough to be like, wow, that smile just really makes me feel special. And you just have that quality. So
I really, really appreciate that. As years go by, it is interesting. I mean, sometimes I my hair's a little lighter now and I changed length and everything, but I really appreciate you saying that because it is, I know like when I see actors that I grew up with and I look at them, as time passes, I go, I still really want to see the person that I first met. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like if they don't look like that, it makes me sad because not that they can't change or be who they are, because that's awesome. That's who they are. Life changes and not everybody does the same thing. But for a fan, you really want to look at that person and go, I remember that person. They were my childhood or they were, my teen years or.
Well, and then I've been following you on social media ever since social media essentially became a thing and you were on social media and you've just really embraced the idea of like, this is me, this is who I am, this is, where I'm at now with my face and, going out and doing things and not trying to, hide the aging process. And you're so genuine in that. And I think that's even one of the things that makes me be even a bigger fan now is just to see like how much you really just love the process of this is who I was, this is who I am, and fans come along with me, Yeah,
I mean, I am very much, and I really, really appreciate you saying that because, I don't try to encourage or discourage. I think you are absolutely correct. I just bring who I am. And it's not even like I bring it like, come on, people, like love me or accept me. Like I just go, this is me. And like, if you don't like it, I mean, that's what's great about the internet. If you don't like it, you'll go to somebody else. That's fine. That's totally fine. And also like, I know I'm somebody who, I look at movies and it brings back memories. So I like nostalgia.
Yes.
So I like that part. But I also have a lot going on for me now. And I have over the years, and there's so much I have lived and my life and I've learned. And, I've got so many things that I want to share with people. I want to help people. I want to help actors. I want to help anyone who comes and, needs a smile. I mean, I just feel like I have a lot to offer. And I feel like as an actor, sometimes people, they get into organizations and contributions and for me, or I don't know, just there's a lot how we can help. But for me, I feel like my own being is like I can really help people one-on-one and I can help people. I don't know, I just have that thinking. So and optimism, and also like I don't give up. I'm very I mean, as you could probably tell, I'm in my 60s now and I've been acting since I was little. So I don't give up. I just keep going. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's really the meat of what I want to discuss with you today, because I am a cult cinema podcast. That doesn't mean that I don't respect and appreciate all the other genres and types of cinema. I'm a cinema appreciator all around. It's just the direction I went, and I just keep on going with that. And if there's one thing I can say about like your cinematic legacy, is that it's amazing to me how you were able to make impressions across multiple genres that have cult followings. But I mean, you started off with like horror, and then like nostalgic comedy, and then quirky comedy, and then science fiction. Like, you represent every genre of the 80s, and you have a loyal fan following for each of those movies. You don't see a lot of, I'm just gonna say, actors in general be able to cross those bridges and those gaps. And when I was putting my notes together and things to talk to you about, that to me is the thing that really makes me the most impressed about your career and the most honored to talk to you, is that how many different cinematic genres that you've covered with different fan bases, but they can all kind of agree that Diane Franklin is iconic in all of them.
Oh, it's so interesting when I go, and first of all, so thankful that you saw that, because I'm a very creative person. So this is, for whatever it's worth, sometimes people in their careers, when they're younger, they had like a manager, an agent who like was very much like, no, we're going to do this genre, I'm going to do this. And also, like, obviously, and when I started in the 80s, it was very much about like, you are this and you play this. And like, I was the ingenue, and I didn't know really where I fit in. I remember my first role I ever got was in a soap opera where I played the evil friend. Mm-hmm. And I am not evil. Like, I am like a really nice person. I'm like a super nice person.
No.
But it's fun. It is so fun. And I was very surprised. I was like, why did they cast me to play this girl who's like the bad girl, like the troublemaker? Because I don't come across that way. I mean, like, I'm not that. I mean, obviously it's acting, but I was kind of surprised I got cast in that. And then I found out, like, I guess, and I'm telling you honestly, like, somebody went, oh, I guess, she's pretty, so we're going to make her evil. And I'm like, that's so weird, because I never thought of myself that way. So when I got that part, I was like, oh yeah, well, I guess if I was a casting director and I saw like a girl who's kind of pretty, I'd be, I'd try to cast her as the vain girl or the popular girl or something. But it was just, for me, I didn't see it coming at all. So whenever I went for auditions, I really just, like, I thought I could play everything. Like, I was like, I'm just going to put it out there. And an example of that also is like TerraVision. When I went and I did TerraVision and I auditioned for it, I didn't look like a punk rocker at all. I went in with my Monique hair, and I was, upbeat, cute, happy Monique. I was just a different person. But I've always wanted to play somebody who's punky. And I always wanted to play somebody who was offbeat. And I knew like I could connect to that character. And I just came in as Susie Putterman. Like, I just had that head. And I was really grateful that Ted Nicolai saw that in me, and that he thought it was what he wanted. Because again, like, I was talking to some other actress friends of mine, and I said, we could have all done each other's jobs. Like, I know horror actresses who could have done comedy, and like, comedy actors who could do horror, and we could have all done it. But it's always in the eyes of the director when they see you, what they want to represent their work with, but I'm sorry. So first of all, I want to say thank you for saying that and noticing that. And even when I go to conventions, this has been very helpful, because if I had just had a horror career, I wouldn't be able to go to like the Comic-Con conventions or the, I go to celebrity conventions, horror conventions, comedy. I'm able to do a wide range. And originally when I wrote books about my life, and the first book I wrote was I wrote an autobiography, and literally I was so timid to think that people even knew who I was, that I made a hard copy book, handmade it. And it's like a silver top, and like made only 50 copies, and offered them at conventions. These are like collector's items now, and they were in color, and I made them by hand because I thought, does anybody even know who I am, and does anyone even care? I put it out there, and somebody said, yeah, like, what's your career? But when I wrote that book, I also said, what is the through line to my life? Like, I've done so many things. I can't just make it a horror book, I didn't have that genre. So it is interesting that you noticed that, because that is actually what I came to discover about my career when I even wrote my autobiography, that I was like, I don't have one genre, and that I had to write to what is the center. And what I really found was the center was being the crush,
Yes.
the girl, right? I was the crush. And I went like, wow, like that, in all the things I've done, pretty much I was the teen crush. And that is a responsibility. Like, it is like, that is a big deal. Like, when you're the crush, I mean, I look at the other actors that have been crushes. I mean, Phoebe Cates, Jennifer Jason Leigh, but like also Demi Moore, Brooke Shields. Like, there's a lot of girls who were the crushes, and Elizabeth Shue, who I know from. We had the same manager back in New York, so like I knew her, and Lori Loughlin even. I knew her from New York. But it's just interesting where our careers took us, and that we stuck in there. And again, like, and I wound up with the indie films, and like I wound up being the actress that is being remembered for films, which, let me tell you, is such a compliment and such an honor, because as an actor, like, if I was a kid and I would say, like, I want to be a movie star, like that would be the dream, right? But today, because there's internet and there's television and, there's radio and there's, animation, there's commercials, there's so many venues, soap opera that you could be well known in. I feel honored that I could be known for indie films, because that's where the experimentation comes in, right, and the real messages come in, the artistic part comes in. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm running on and on.
No, that's why I had you on the show. I wanted you on the show to hear all this. No, like, so you bring up a really interesting point, which leads even to one of my first questions, is that, when you are in that, fledgling actress mode, because you'd been, acting in theater and commercials and things like that, but when you come to your first two features, Last American Virgin and Amityville 2, two very polar opposite films in the same year, like, what did that audition process look like? Were you just going from audition to audition to audition, and those are two that just kind of landed around the same time, or?
Yes, I did go for a lot of auditions. I was back in New York for both. I was in New York when I auditioned for both of them. Well, actually, what was interesting is I had been acting since I was professionally acting since I was 10. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting was I graduated from college, from high school, and then there was like a year or a year and a half or year gap where I went to school, but nothing hit. Like, I maybe did commercials, but I was auditioning and auditioning and auditioning. Nothing was happening. And then once Virgin hit, it was like a door opened, like it flooded. Like, all of a sudden, people wanted to see me, and I got to, and I think it was also because both films were coming out in the same year. So that was like like word of mouth about me came out. Mm-hmm. And I got a chance to audition for amazing projects. I mean, I was screen tested. I was one of the 3 people to be screen tested for Karate Kid. I auditioned for Flashdance and got a call back. I mean, all these things, I go look back and I go, or Bachelor Party, I got a call back for that. Like, just a lot of things that you never think about, but like that actors do this, but such big name projects. And Amadeus, like there were a lot of projects. We'll get into that. But what happened with those films is, I think it put me on the map.
Yeah.
And for me, I had worked so long, because I said, like, I started at 10 years old, and I had been acting in commercials and radio and soap opera and theater during that time, and even an extra job in Endless Love, the movie Endless Love, that I was really prepared and ready when it hit. And people don't know, but like I did those 2 movies, and then I did 2 films back to back, movies for television, Summer Girl and Deadly Lessons. And then I also did a TV pilot for ABC. So things, and then I was recurring on 2 television shows at the same time, on Channel 2 and Channel 4. There were only 13 channels, okay? And people had to get up and go to movie theaters to see something. So even though there were 2 movies coming out, that was a big deal because there was no other form of entertainment except for 13 channels on the TV. And those weren't even all major. Some of them were cable. And so what you found for entertainment, we were much more limited to what we saw. Whereas today, if you're in 2 movies, people don't even never even heard of them or saw them, you know? So it was a bigger deal then. It was more attention on what I was doing.
I love that. And I think that Amityville 2 and Last American Virgin have been talked about enough. You just let it slip. I got to tell you, Diane Franklin, my favorite role of yours of all time is Summer Girl. I love Summer Girl so much. It's not even funny.
So good, isn't it? It's so good. Summer Girl is this is a very lovely story. Okay, so Summer Girl, if you don't know, it's about an evil babysitter, a manipulative. Well, actually, at the time, I'm looking at it always as evil, but the truth was that, and it's interesting because I don't know if it could even be done today.
Yeah,
character was they said schizophrenic. I had multiple. I think maybe multiple personality.
Yeah, the DID I think was definitely in there.
Yeah. And the thing about it is back then, because that wasn't, it wasn't researched, it wasn't discussed yet, that became like, ooh, like this person with multiple personalities is scary and unpredictable. And so I wanted, if anybody who is suffering from that, I just want to say ignorance was happening. We didn't know what was going on during that time. But this movie is very delicious because the character that I play comes in being very kind of demure. There's
demure. It's hot right now.
Demure, but also like shy and not that and homely looking, and then winds up being this knockout, which completely destroys the family. And I seduce the husband, who was played by Barry Bostwick, and kidnap the kids and to try to take them away from the mother.
Kim Darby
from Better Off Dead. Again, we reunited. But so I really appreciate you like that movie because you saw Kim Darby again. And anybody who sees that, we have these dramatic scenes and we just let it fly. I mean, that's what's great about being a professional actor. You go in, you do the work, you play, you are in the moment, you make it real. And then you do, then years later, we did Better Off Dead, and it's comedy and you let it play.
And totally opposite.
And it's the trust, if you, the thing I really have to say about when acting feels great is when you trust your acting partners. You know that you can trust each other and you're going to take care of each other. You're not going to do something messed up. And, that's professionalism. You have to, you're in the moment and you're playing and you could trust each other to throw something at them and they're like, oh, I get it. But anyway, let's get back to Summer Girl. Summer Girl is such a fun project because the woman who produced it was a actress herself. And oh my gosh, the name is gone. I'm sure you can probably look it up. But anyway, she was a beautiful actress. She was, and it was very important for her. She was producing the film. Can't believe it. She passed away a few years ago. Anyway, I'll have to remember it later.
I'll look it up while you do that.
Okay. And so basically it was very important for her to have me play this part. And I think Diane Lane was originally considered and she turned it down. So when I am not the typical beach looking girl. So for me, I had a more ethnic look. I had my dark curly hair and I was like, I wanted to play that part and I knew I could play it emotionally. But I also wasn't really a water person. So I had to really act and believe that I was somebody who was so casual in the water. It was no big deal. But it was when I wound up going for the audition, and I had to read for the network. You know, there's a room full of people, and I'm coming in and I'm reading these lines, these parts. And that's, in the old days, there was no recording. You went into a room of, executives, and you auditioned, and it's terribly nerve wracking, and it's only down to maybe 2 girls or 3 girls. It's terrifying. But I knew that this producer, it meant so much for me to have this part, because she actually competed with Donna Reed. And Donna Reed, I actually did Deadly Lessons with, but I didn't know this at the time. But Donna Reed was the blonde version of, like, Americana, and then there was this actress who,
is it Roberta Haynes?
Yes, thank you so much. I felt like, on the back of my hand, I know her name, but Roberta, yes. So Roberta has been acting. She was the more ethnic beauty. And so she was always coming up against, and I think for her, it was really important that I got that role for having an identity for, ethnic girls. So, I mean, I was so excited to play it. And when I got that part, I rushed to the YMCA to, like, take swimming lessons and go underwater and do it. Because when I was growing up, I had, I'm deaf in one ear. So going underwater I missed that time when kids go underwater and they do it all the time and they just swim and they have no fear of it or anything. But I had to have tubes in my ears. So, like, for a year I couldn't swim, and then I got uncomfortable, but I got through it. And so, see what acting can do. It can get you to face your fears. So I was like, no, I got the part. I'm going to go swim and do this. And I swam, and in the water, I convinced myself that I was Cindy. I had no problem with it. It was no big deal. So thank you for saying that. That movie of the week you can see on YouTube, I think. But I hope they release it.
I hope so too. That's something to be said too. I mean, just to go off like a mini tangent, is that, I'm old enough to remember when movies of the week and TV movies were movies, right? And that's a lost art. We're not going to see that anymore, because I feel like streaming, there are things that are made on streaming that are under the radar that are good, but now it's just like content. But in the 70s and 80s, and I'm going to say even up to the early 90s, before cable really took over, they put a lot of heart and soul and quality into TV movies. And Summer Girl could, in my opinion, have been put on the big screen and it would have worked.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was nominated, or like they had me up for nomination for that. It was the only thing I actually ever was up for a nomination for a project, because again, as an actor, you work, but it's the quality and the genre, and if you're the A-list, A-list people are always looking for those projects that can win awards. Indie people are also looking for that, but they're looking for that audience who understands them, and so with Summer Girl, it's just like a really fun, juicy story. And I don't know if you could make something like that today.
I mean, obviously there's like a little bit of a taboo to it, which I was really surprised how, far they were able to take that on TV. I mean, it's done very tastefully. Like the taboo is there, but it's not an exploitation type of taboo. But one of the things I really liked about how they put that all together is that this is a story about Kim Darby, and you're essentially the gaslighter. It's like Gaslight in reverse. You're manipulating her into thinking that she's left the keys out of the purse or turned the power off. Like, we hear the term gaslighting all the time just thrown around. We see it used as plot points in movies. But I'm going to say, like, since the original Gaslight from the 1940s, Summer Girl might be the best representation of that, of how anybody, in this case, a teenage girl, can do it.
Manipulating that mother, making you double think, what did I do? What didn't I do? And that she's, in that story too, Kim Darby's alone. Like, her husband doesn't believe her. Her kids are too young to, be participating.
Right.
Just turning it all around. And it was such a juicy part. I was really excited to play it because, again, those roles did not come up. They were not there. I do have a funny story to tell you. There was a guy who I knew, a writer. He actually wrote Gilmore Girls, Stan Zimmerman. He was a friend of mine during that time. And he said to me, he wanted to write a show for me that was like the Patty Duke show, based when he saw that.
Uh-huh.
And I thought how interesting, because that double personality, because he saw that in Summer Girl, that
Right.
two-sided thing. And I thought that was just an interesting concept. Patty Duke show is much more Americana and but imagine if it was an evil twin.
That's a great idea. You can still do it. You just do it as a mom instead. And so before I wrap up on Summer Girl, because it was the thing I wanted to talk to you about the most, believe it or not, was a TV movie from like 1983. One of the things that I think is really cool about Summer Girl is that it only, on Letterboxd, there's only 83 views. Only 83 people out of millions of people on Letterboxd have seen Summer Girl. It is my mission to get as many people, as many of my listeners, as any people that follow me on social media, to get on YouTube and watch Summer Girl, because to me, it is like one of the most uncovered gems that I can think of in so long. It's so good. It is the kind of movie that if enough people watch it, someone's going to put it on a Blu-ray. Someone's going to dig it out of whatever archive it's in, because it needs to be seen. You are so damn good in it.
Thank you. And it is, yes, it's really juicy. And I guess my question is, do you think it still can fly today?
Absolutely. And even like, I'm not going to say like a theatrical release, but for example,
like I like it,
Drew Barrymore's Poison Ivy was like kind of frowned upon when it came out, even though it got a bunch of sequels that aren't nearly as good. But now it's kind of like in the lexicon. And I feel that Summer Girl has that juice to it, where it could get back into the lexicon of like, wow, I don't want to say like these Lolita thrillers, because it's really not that. It's more mature psychologically than just the sexuality of this girl. Right?
It's very sexy. And I think that, that is, I don't think that ever gets old. I think that's, fun. I remember some friends of ours, the younger kids had seen it on TV, and they were like, oh, you were such a vixen. And I'm like, this is like so 80s. Like, it's so like, it was not a big deal then, And so I think generations, they go from like, sexy to like, a little bit more demure.
Right. It's demure again.
That's of course why you're going to think, whoa, because you're thinking more demure people. So, but it goes back and forth.
And another movie that I'm going to jump to, that I'm not sure if you get asked a lot about it, but Second Time Lucky. I think it's a very interesting concept, and it's quirky and it's fun, but I can see why like it doesn't really get spoken about a lot, because maybe it's got too many conflicting subjects in one movie, where I love the fact that it is following these two people through different eras and through different decades, and it definitely helps prove that dialect part that's on your IMDb, because you use a different accent in every single era. What was that film like?
Oh, okay. So that film, I remember that was when I came back. I was auditioning for Amadeus.
Yeah.
Between myself and Elizabeth Berridge. And I came back from Amadeus, and my agent said, I have this film and they want to offer you the movie. And I mean, I don't know if you can imagine that experience where I'm coming back, and I was exhausted, by the way. I had just done Summer Girl and Deadly Lessons. I was exhausted. So when I didn't get Amadeus, I was like, you know what? I hope that I would have, like, I'm like exhausted. I was like, I know that, Elizabeth will do an amazing job. And I was actually happy for her that she got it, so that she would now, really do a great job. But when I came back, I was offered this film. Now the film, the perks were working with Michael Anderson, who was an Oscar winner, I think, directing Around the World in 80 Days. And he did Logan's Run, which was one of my favorite films. And so I was so excited to work with him. We were shooting in New Zealand, which was incredible. I thought that was just a great thing. And the characters, the first thing really were the characters playing Eve, okay, Adam and Eve, but Eve throughout time. And to me, I was like, well, I'm just going to have, a party on this one. This is going to be my chance to really show what I can do. I mean, I was so excited. And the interesting thing I heard also was originally Bo Derek and her husband were supposed to be in the film, which is so different. Okay. That's just something, such a different thing. I couldn't even imagine how I even got in there. But for whatever it's worth, the pros were all of that. And I, in that area, I went insane. I mean, I loved the dialects. I thought it was shot beautifully. It was great working with Roger Wilson. We had a lot of freedom, and I think that as an indie actor, that's the best gift you could get, to have freedom to create and do. And Michael Anderson was such a lovely man to work with, and he was open to what we wanted to do, and he had very lovely taste as far as like how we should look and how we were portrayed, and it was wonderful. The only thing that and by the way, obviously there's nudity, which I had no problem with, only because I'm Eve. Yeah. So I'm sorry, but if I'm playing a real Eve, there's got to be Eve, okay?
Right.
I mean, you're not going to have little pasty things and no tape, like whatever, I don't know. Or you could have like leaves strategically placed, but let's face it, if it's real, it's real. But the writing was very, I always say this is the film was like you said, the conflict of tones. It was like Benny Hill meets Gone with the Wind.
Right.
Beautiful film. It's gorgeous. I have these great scenes, but the sense of humor and you could have the nudity, but it didn't have to have bum.
I agree with you. If in a way, like when I rewatched it before this conversation, and to me it almost feels like a Ken Russell film, but just a tier down. Like if Ken Russell had done it, it would have had the silliness and the campiness to make it work, but also the serious moments would be more serious. Like you can have both. And I see exactly what you're saying. Is like there are moments where it's like, I'm invested in these characters, and then like you said, there's the bum. There's that joke where it's like, okay, that was kind of corny.
Corny is the word. And I'm going to tell you something. I think that was because it was in English humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, look, that's what indies are sometimes, they bring everybody together. So the humor doesn't hit in America. It hits maybe in England. And I don't know how well it did there, but you made a really good point, because it's not American humor.
Yeah, it would be lost.
Yeah.
I know that my listeners and the people that are so jealous of me talking to you right now would kill me if I don't at least ask a Better Off Dead question. So here's the Better Off Dead question. How was it working with Curtis Armstrong and John Cusack and Kim Darby?
All right. So imagine just hanging out with all your best friends. Do you know what I mean? And they get your humor and they get your jokes. I have to say, working on that film was such a joy. And, you can't say that about everything you work with. There's always problems. Maybe you like one person or another person's having problems with this. First of all, just because it's a comedy made everybody a lot more, it brings a positive vibe to it. But the most important thing was that Savage Steve Holland, who was directing it at the time, was, a director is the person who brings the whole film together, and they're the person who sets the mood on set. And it was so funny. He never got tense or he was 24 when he directed, and he was always laughing and joking, but watching us. And he was so grateful and so amazed by everything we were doing that he created this really wonderful feeling on set. So that made all of us as actors relax and go into it. Now I know that, everyone says like, oh, John, didn't get along with Savage. And that wasn't true when we were working. When we did the movie, John was joking around. John had a great time. He was a kid too. Like we were all having a good time. And it wasn't until, I guess, after when he thought it was what it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. But when we did it, no, John was a doll. He was a sweetheart. Like we were joking and we were like, he was goofing around and like, I don't know, it was like, there were things like off behind the scenes. We were just joking and messing with each other. And he was a good sport and everyone, and Curtis, killer, just hilarious. All the improv that we did, in fact, it was sad because, nowadays people keep the bloopers, they keep all the behind the scene things, but then they didn't. And I remember saying to Savage, did you keep all those extra tapes? And he was like, no, we don't have anything. And it's such a shame because we didn't see the value in that, at the time.
Right.
Or also, everything was so expensive, you couldn't just keep extra tapes or keep extra things. It was down to the second of what was going to be kept as a film. So in answer to your question, okay, I'll go down the list. Amanda Wyss, still my friend to this day. We met on that film. And if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what, because we are best friends and we see each other all the time. So she's great. And she was hilarious as Beth.
She's perfect.
Bad girl, right? Like, she's so adorable. I think that the casting was really good because they didn't cast the typical, haughty girl. She's a cute girl. She's really sweet. So that was fun. Curtis and I had a blast working together. Such a nice, he's so funny, but I have such tremendous respect for his intelligence. He's a brilliant actor. And when you work with him, like the scene where we have the binoculars, he's looking, and I'm like, we should do something with this, and so, I'm like grabbing them and, and he's choking, so, and that's a bit, that's a lot of the stuff that happened in that film were bits that we came up with in the moment. And, he came up with the idea of the hat, and that's all an example of Savage being open to it. He was not controlling, but he was like, let's see what you guys have to bring to it. Dan Schneider, during that time, great.
Yeah.
Hilarious. So funny. Like the scene on the couch when he's playing with that doll, he's just sitting there and just using his eyes. Die. Like I tried just not to look at him because I knew I'd start to laugh. Also the Jello scene, same thing. Looking at him and he offering that to me, I almost died laughing. And then I had to turn to Curtis. You know what I mean? Then I'm like, see my lip going, I'm just trying to keep it down. And that also was improvised, the Jello scene.
Well, goodness, Diane, the one thing I have to say about that role is that you spend almost half the movie silent. It's a silent performance. You're doing so much face acting. You're doing so much body acting that when you finally do have your French rant, it's like that moment in Seven where it's like, oh, what's in the box? Like it surprises us as an audience where she speaks and she's got this beautiful French accent, but that whole time up until that moment where you speak, it's all about your facial performance. And to me, that's just like one of the best parts of that movie is just your reactions to what everyone's doing.
I so appreciate that. It reminds me also of Last American Virgin as Karen. Because part of the movie is like, I don't talk at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, I've got this personality or I'm talking, which is so interesting because being deaf on one ear, there were a couple of things. Being deaf on one ear, I do pay more attention to how people use their body, their facial expressions. And I remember being a kid and watching TV with the sound off. Just because usually people are talking or something, and I would watch actors. I would watch their facial expressions. I would ask myself, do I believe them? What are they doing without sound that makes me believe them? So I was always studying that as a kid. It fascinated me, people's body movements and eyes and expressions, and the bigness and also the subtleness. So that is, and also I took dance. So that's probably maybe very connected to my body and be able to, I used to do ballet. So I think I had a connection that all came together in my performances. Everything I studied, I took singing lessons. And as a child, I guess I got, and then, so singing, you're listening to tones and and how words are pronounced. And that gets me much more connected to dialects. So I'm going to tell you, as an actor and somebody who's done indies, it was just very important the way I was raised and how I was able to. All I can tell you is genuine inquisitiveness. As my parents didn't do this. It was my general and deep interest in the psychology, in the movement, and the voice, and the center of the character that got me to continue. And Monique was a joy to play because she was the nicest character I've ever played. She was the role model.
Yeah, no, and everyone wanted Monique. That's what I always say about John Cusack movies of the 80s and even the 90s. The joke is always getting rained on because, the girl broke his heart. But in Better Off Dead, I mean, it's a quirky comedy, but it speaks so true to the teenage male experience where, like, all of us have had a Beth and all of us have wanted a Monique to save us from ourselves. And we don't always get that. And that's what I think the beauty of that movie is that you do save him from himself. But the compliment I can pay you the best that I can in my verbiage is when I talked about your grin, never to me has a grin said so much than in your performance in Better Off Dead, because every response you have that's a facial movement to anyone's activity is through a grin, and the grins are always different. So even when Ricky's discussing you, you give him a grin, like almost like not let him down, but it's a very indifferent grin. It's not a welcoming come hither grin. So the way that you communicate all of these ideas and emotions through grinning, it's just one of my favorite things about that movie. It's an amazing performance.
Can I just say that I hope, I really, really, really appreciate that. And I hope that other actors will realize, sometimes the something you have no idea that you're portraying becomes something you're known for, or something that means something to someone.
Right.
So I just want to say, no one's ever said that about my smile. Sometimes people say they like my eyes or something, but I love this. Thank you. You're touching my heart.
Oh.
That's like, because I think that with my face, I get to transfer happiness to people. So good. Then that's the good thing to be able to do. So
we've already talked about TerraVision. I love TerraVision. I love your character, and I love that you have like a Cyndi Lauper kind of thing going on. Was that kind of like a subtle inspiration for you in that performance?
That character, we knew that Cyndi Lauper was definitely part of the influence. It certainly was with the look. Uh-huh. It was Valley Girl meets Cyndi Lauper, and then a punk attitude, kind of like the thing about Susie Putterman, which I loved, was she was the smart aleckist, or smartest character of everything I've played as a young person. Yeah. Because in a lot of the stuff I portrayed, I had to hold back. Like even in Virgin, I had to be just the girl. Yeah. And you can see how much I can talk. It wasn't always like this. I have to say I got the gift of gab from my husband. But I was very quiet. But in Virgin, I really had to hold back. Everything was much more subtle. And in TerraVision was the first time that I really could say what I thought. Like I saw something disgusting and I'm like, ew. Like I could say, ode. Yeah. Just bring up these things that, and then we're going to make $1 million. She's entrepreneurial, so it was not the classic girl of the 80s that I was able to play. It was closer to actually a Molly Ringwald character.
Okay.
Molly Ringwald in her movies was a girl that she was the smart girl, but it was now considered attractive to be discerning. Right. So Molly Ringwald would be like, she was the character that went, I don't buy this. I don't like this. And women were not, teenage characters were not portrayed like that. That would be considered,
right. I love that because what it did, and I'm not sure if you've ever read any of Chuck Klosterman's books, but he wrote a book called Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, where he was talking about how Lloyd Dobler ruined his life because he just convinced himself that he was Lloyd Dobler, and it took him decades to get out of it. That idea that in the 80s, especially with Molly Ringwald, was that it was really the role and the performance of this woman that made teenage girls mysterious. Like, we didn't see on their face what they were actually feeling, so it was more work. And I don't know, I think that's something that's like lived through my generation, where it's, if you're a very sincere person and you're talking to me, I feel like there is, I don't know, something that's not trustworthy. But if you're a mystery and you're not letting all of your expression and emotion out, then I am now infatuated with a conversation with you. And that's what she kind of brought. And I can see what you're talking about now in that role in TerrorVision, because you feel like you don't even like the person you like John Grise, right? As OD. It's like you're with him, he's your boyfriend, but you are just as annoyed with him as you are everyone else. And so it really does kind of build that mysterious characterization of like, does she even like anything?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's funny? That character is actually more like girls today.
Yeah, they've learned.
I like you, I don't like you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say what I think, and I don't really care how it comes across, like if you like it or not, because you better like me. Like, it's a whole different ballgame, you know? It is definitely, she's more of a, she shows her smarts, the character, and it was a fun character to play. And but it definitely, women, and there's smart women throughout history. It's just that in film, it wasn't portrayed that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, or we didn't want that to be the girlfriend. But I know a lot of guys who loved Susie Putterman.
Yeah, I love Susie Putterman.
I like, because she's very much like today's girls, and I get to shoot a machine gun, which was really like, I had never, I've gone to a shooting range before, but that was like an amazing experience to have a role that did that. So she's a very empowered character.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that was all filmed in Italy?
Yes. Rome. It was filmed in Italy for no reason other than that the crew, it was probably less expensive to shoot it in Italy.
When you see the credits, it's all Italian names. I was like, interesting. I mean, I've seen that before in other movies, especially like it was a band production, and bands always shot in Europe because it was cheaper. I think Charles Band had like a castle or something that they let him shoot Castle Freak in because it was essentially free to use. So they always did stuff like that. So yeah, that was really interesting. I'm like, oh wow, it's an entire Italian production about valley girls and swingers.
Nothing was outside. Even the outside was an inside.
Right. You could tell too. It's beautiful.
Yeah, right. But it gives it that kind of quirky look. So it really works for the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that like it does feel like a TV set, and it's a movie about TV and aliens essentially, but another classic. Yeah,
Ted Nicolai, he killed it. I mean, an alien coming out of the TV, and it's like a dog thing.
Right, it was someone's pet.
It's like a pet. It is adorable. I mean, I love that film just because it's so. We all were in on the joke. We totally knew what was happening. We thought it was going to be a huge hit. There's an example. We thought it was going to be huge because we thought, oh, people get the idea of making fun of the 80s. But even to this day, people think it's taken seriously. Like, what did these people think about, no, it's a comedy. It's, anyway.
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, and I'm not sure, you've probably spoken to other cinema podcasts too, but in the cult cinema world, in the boutique Blu-ray label world, it's a prize. Like, people have rediscovered these movies. This is what I say all the time in my conversations on the show or with people at the art house theater. It's like, these movies that ended up either on the shelf, not a Blockbuster, but like the mom and pop video store, because Blockbuster needed to make space for Titanic.
Right.
Or 12 o'clock on USA, Up All Night. You would find these movies. And then we would love them, and then we couldn't find them for years. And now these boutique Blu-ray labels and great streaming services like Tubi, they're putting these things back on there. They're getting rediscovered by younger generations. And it makes us look at the older generations that should have seen these movies in the theater and like, what the hell was wrong with you? You guys slept on this? This is great. All this crap behind me is the perfect example of that, where it's like, hey, I'm not going to go spend my money on clothes anymore because they're going to be, worn out and gone in a year. I'm going to build up the collection of things that I wished my Blockbuster had when I was younger and didn't. And that's the mindset that I go into when I choose movies to buy or to speak about on podcasts.
Oh, wow. That's a great idea. No, very, very smart, because, and it also reflects on your intelligence and you get it. You understand. I mean, I love the fact that you have such a vocabulary of understanding. You have a vocabulary of film knowledge. And you, when you look across everything and you see everything, you suddenly go, oh, wow. Like, I get this, why this is a gem and this is a gem, because you see everything, and then you understand even like how America specifically is, like how we have mainstream and we have indie, and how it's there will always be that.
Mm-hmm.
They will never just be mainstream, they'll never just be indie, but it'll always be together. And that if you're a deeper person, you go into the deeper, you go behind the scenes.
Right. And then you can see how these little indie movies or these movies that were slept on for years actually influenced the stuff that's coming out in theaters today that people don't recognize. And then you have people like me, or when you have conversations with other people, whether it's on podcasts or on YouTube, and you can point out like, hey, well, you know what? This script or this idea, it didn't really get recognized when we did it, but when they did it in this movie, it became iconic, and now people can go back and see it. It's like a cyclical thing. I think that
I knew that it came out, I think 87 or 86, and people didn't get it because we were still in the 80s. And when something comes out, it takes a few years for that to even hit the country and people to trust it and like, okay, now that's cool.
Right.
So I'm really glad that people are rewatching it now, because they're getting to see, wow, just the goofiness and the funniness and the acting. The actors in this are amazing.
Oh my God.
The actors in that movie.
Mary Warrenov and Garrett Graham, forget about it. Absolutely. Well, so I got two more questions for you before we wrap up this conversation. Bill and Ted, I'm not going to get into it because I'm sure it's a huge rabbit hole. And there's so much content out there on Bill and Ted now, what with like the last movie coming out and all the great releases, the interviews that people have. I'm sure they can find it. The biggest question I have for you is, what happened with the sequel? Did you not get asked back? Is that the rough question of the interview?
Yeah. Yes. I'm a very kind person.
Yes.
Told you that.
I can tell. I've noticed in the last 45, 50 minutes.
This is a pure example of it. Kimberly and I wanted nothing more than to be in that film. We really thought, the way it was presented to us, like, oh, well, part 2 was just a mistake. And we auditioned for our own role in part 2, which is so surreal, because if they either should have just offered it to us or said, we're going a totally different way. But they made it was like a lot of excuses. It wasn't clear. And then when this third movie came up, we were like, oh my gosh, we will fly out on our own dime to be on it. I mean, really. And they kept saying, oh, we'd like you to be in it, but maybe it'll be like, I don't know, maybe you'll be in the audience. We were like, just bring us there. Like, but and the beginning, it was very like, well, maybe. And I honestly felt the biggest disappointment of it was that I knew that if we were back, it would be such a gift to the audience.
Yeah.
Because that's a callback. And you always want to see, you go, oh yeah, they're back.
Mm-hmm.
And like the audience, it's just a reward for the audience. So when they weren't there, and it's nothing to do with the actresses, good luck to them. I'm glad we have a lot of Bill and Ted actresses, princesses now. We could all do a convention.
Right. The Bill and Ted princess party, I'm in.
But Kimberly and I were really hurt. Like we were devastated. It was not good. And I really was, it was can I use the S word?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Sexist, it was not cool to have, and then on top of it, like even when I did Bill and Ted's, they didn't have our names right. I was Princess Joanna on it, and she was Princess Elizabeth, and that's like so disrespectful. So the only thing I can say is, I go to a funny place with it. I think it's like, this is typical. This is typical. Totally, not giving us legit names, I mean, like in the credits, and then not bringing us back. And then we're, just the babes. It's very indicative of being disrespectful to women.
Yeah.
Vanity Fair did an article on it, and that made me feel very good because they at least acknowledged it.
Right.
But, I do, but I totally get, it's a bro movie, right? Like, it's bros, like dudes, and I get that. And I totally understand the focus on the guys. And I love Keanu and I love Alex. They're awesome. I just think that it would have been a bigger success if we were in it. I really do. I really think it would have been like, it really added, because I know my fans are really loyal and they were very disappointed.
I was very disappointed, especially we are in the era of the legacy sequel. Like the biggest legacy sequel of all time, the Top Gun movie came out and no one came back except for Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, but that was a gimme. And that's the thing, is like, I feel the legacy sequels are doing a disservice to their true fans when they don't at least pay some kind of homage to the people that were in the original one that really built the groundwork for that story. And as
the new generation doesn't care,
they don't care. But that's the thing. I don't think that's what the movie was made for them. Like
yeah.
The Bill and Ted Part 3 was made for me when I was 9 years old in the theater seeing it. So being, 40 when it came out, I was like, okay, take me back. And Diane Franklin wasn't there, and I was very upset.
Almost excellent. And I think you should have been the producer or director.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm a podcaster instead. Maybe someday. All right. I'm going to give you just one last question because I really want you to have the floor. And you've had the floor graciously. Thank you so much for giving me all your insight to your career. But really, my last question is, what are your thoughts and feelings about being a cult film icon? Because I don't know, I feel like there are some performers and some actors who are like, don't call me a cult film icon. Don't call me a genre film icon. I want to be held at a higher regard of that. But I mean, like I said, you are so interactive with your fans on social media, the Better Off Dead Facebook page. You are always involved. You're always involved in that stuff. And so you really seem to like be so grateful for the people who have followed you all this way. Was that the plan? Like when you were getting into this industry, you're like, okay, well, I want to be known for my work, but was there something disappointing about it being genre, or are you happy that you are so recognized for being so different in this industry than some of the actresses or actors even that we don't speak about as much because I feel like they were afraid to be different?
I will say this. There are a lot of actors who are very, very famous, and they don't want you to know that maybe they can't work as much because they're so famous. They can't do something like smaller. They can't do a little thing like that. Do you know what I'm saying? It's harder. There's no, and they could be very lonely. It's a whole world. Okay. It's just if someone owns a mansion, that might be their compound. You just don't know, the world is not necessarily how it seems. But when I was young, the first thing that ever happened for me, I remember this because this is all coming full circle. You're bringing it up right now, and it's full circle, is when I did the extra job in Endless Love. And I was so grateful. It was first movie time on a movie set, and I saw Brooke Shields. And I knew Brooke from modeling, but this was like, she was so nice to me, and she was so beautiful. And she did such a great job in that film. And I remember after I asked her to take a picture with me, and she graciously did it. And I mean, it would be like, we were both young, and she's super, super duper, but she was so nice and she was so pretty. And I thought, I always wanted, you hear about a lot of actors just not being nice, and they're not appreciating what they have or have happened to them. I mean, and believe me, it's not all roses, but she was an interesting person. And I remember saying to myself, okay, I don't need to be an actress anymore, because after meeting her, she did everything I wanted. She's beautiful. She's super nice. And I thought, that is what I just wanted to have in the business. Like, see somebody who's really like doing a good job, and they're doing their work, but they're just a nice person. And then the next morning I woke up and said, I said, I'm not going to be an actress. Then what am I going to do? Like, and it was like maybe 14 or 15. And I went, I just kind of thought, what do I do in my life? Am I going to be a scientist? I don't know. It was kind of all these things. And then I went to bed, woke up the next morning and went, I have to be an actress, and there's going to be room for more nice people. That I'm going to just make more room. So cut to now, I have to say that I give back because I never forgot that. Like, it's important to be a nice person. And, that doesn't mean that I don't have problems, that I don't have things I'm going through, that it's just that I don't wear my problems on my sleeve. I want to make sure everyone else is good, and I can take care of myself. I'll be okay. And like, for whatever it is, and then I really appreciate when you say I'm an icon, literally, like I recently was thinking, is anyone going to remember me like 10 years from now? Like, and I think that that's the big thing with a lot of actors too, or big names, they walk into a mall or something and kids don't know who they are, but the parents do. Mm-hmm. So the next generation, they may not remember you like you want them to remember you. And I always wonder, I think, how am I going to be remembered? What generation, like, is it going to be people who pass on the Bill and Ted's? Am I going to be the princess? Or are people going to keep passing on Bill and Better Off Dead? Or is Last American Virgin going to last because it's so controversial? Mm-hmm. Or is Amityville going to live because it's got some controversial things and it's a classic horror film? Or Summer Girl, right? Like, what is going to be my legacy, So I do wonder about that. And that's why when you say this to me, I will take it in my heart, because it is not a given. And it is from decades of hard work, decades of sticking in there. And people who don't embrace it, that's just who they are. I don't know. That's just not everybody gets it or appreciates it. But I do.
I'm so glad you do. And, me as a fan and so many of my listeners and people that I talk to about these movies every day, they appreciate it too. The accessibility, I'm going to say, is important, because I feel like there is that kind of double-edged sword of fame and celebrity, where it's like, I don't want to be too connected with the public because you never know.
That's true too.
But at the same time,
I'm very trusting, I guess. That's another.
You're very trusting. You're very trusting, but I also think that, like, you being so open with all of the nostalgic things that you have in your possession that other people share, back behind the scene photos and clips and things like that. It's so great. So I can't thank you enough for being on the show, talking about these things. And I just want to thank you for entertaining us for, these decades that we've been watching you, and being so open with us about the information and your experiences, that if people listen to this episode a year from now, 2 years from now, at least they can say, oh, well, I loved that episode of The Cultworthy where Antonio talked to Diane Franklin and they had a great conversation about all the things and all the movies that we've just loved over time. And you're just a real blessing to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I will, and people just follow me on my social media, because I have a lot more happening, and it's just, I have more to give. All right? You won't be disappointed.
And we're here to take it. Diane, thank you so much. And everyone, please follow her on social media. Please follow her on her Instagram and on her Facebook page. She's just so great. And I'm going to keep praising your movies on my show and on other people's shows. You're just fantastic. And I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much, Antonio.